Every morning, she sat silently on the wooden bench across the street from the café. She didn't speak. She didn't beg. She didn't blame. At her feet, a large gray dog lay curled beside her, like an old soldier keeping watch over sorrow. His eyes were still open, but they no longer expected kindness from people. Most walked past without noticing, but Clara did, because sometimes the greatest things begin with the souls the world has tried hardest to forget. Atlanta hadn't quite opened its eyes yet. Mist clung stubbornly to the windows. The sidewalk breathed quiet, holding the night a little longer. And in the old quarter, where red brick buildings leaned on each other like old friends, a modest cafe named Morning Porch had already flickered to life. No neon lights, no artificially sweetened caramel scent, no pop music pressing against the ears, just the hush of a kettle about to sing, a trace of cinnamon in the air, and golden light spilling softly onto worn wood floors, like a whisper that didn't need to be heard to be felt. Clara Reyes had been awake for hours. She moved behind the counter like someone weaving a spell. Her apron was neatly pressed, her hands calloused from real work, and her eyes carried the stillness of someone who had seen too much, but chose gentleness anyway. At 42, Clara was a quiet force. Her skin was a warm, steady brown. Her hair tightly coiled and swept into a low bun. The lines at the corners of her eyes weren't from age. They were from choosing grace over and over again. Once, Clara had been a trauma nurse. They used to say if Reyes was on shift, you had a fighting chance. But one night changed everything. 2 patients arrived. A black man, bloodied and unconscious, and a white city official clutching his chest. Clara chose the one no one else would have, and the system chose to let her go. Weeks later, her husband, a Marine medic serving in a relief mission, didn't come home. She packed away her scrubs and her wedding ring, and opened a cafe instead. But Morning Porch wasn't a business. It was a quiet rebellion, a place for the overlooked, the worn down, and those who simply needed a soft place to land. There was Mrs. Matthews, the widow with moonlight hair, who sat by the window every morning with a single cup of chamomile, leaving behind a pressed daisy as a kind of silent prayer. There was little Andre, all of 11, always carrying a chessboard, always searching for someone who wouldn't mind his quiet. At other cafes, he was a nuisance. Here, he was part of the morning. And Miguel, the delivery driver with eyes like dusk. He said little, but Clara always knew which tea eased his mother's tremors. Then there was the woman on the bench. She never came in. She never spoke. Every morning at 6 sharp, she sat across the street. Same coat, worn to the threads. Same knit cap pulled low. Her hair a wild silver halo around a face that had forgotten how to ask for anything. At her feet, a large gray dog, silent as a soldier who had stayed too long in the field. Eyes wide, but waiting for nothing. Clara never saw him bark, but every morning, when she left a warm loaf of bread and a small thermos of herbal tea on the windowsill, the dog would rise, pad across the street, and gently lick her hand. Once, like a secret past between the forgotten and the kind, she called him Rue, because something about him still looked up, still remembered the sky. She never asked the woman's name. Names were for systems. Recognition was something else. The city moved faster every day. People brushed past each other like wind through branches. But Morning Porch held still. It let people breathe. It made room. Then, one foggy morning, Andre ran through the door, his breath fast. Miss Clara, Rue's not there. Her hands stopped mid-pour. She looked out. The bench was empty. So was the space the world had made for someone invisible. She grabbed the bread, the tea, stepped outside. No one noticed, but Clara did. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again. Clara stood in the tender hush of morning, still holding the thermos of ginger cinnamon tea. Her eyes lingered on the bench across the street, the bench that had always held a presence, now conspicuously empty. Morning porch looked the same, golden light, freshly baked cinnamon bread, the soft rhythm of tea being poured. But anyone who knew this place knew something had shifted. She set the thermos down, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked to the back wall. A photo hung there, Clara and her husband in medical field uniforms. He was smiling, raising an IV bag like a trophy. A Marine Corps emblem shimmered on his collar. Beneath the frame, the words had faded but still read, "Every life is worth saving." And Grady Memorial Hospital, 2:43 a.m. winter years ago. 2 patients arrived at once. A white state official who'd slipped on stairs. A young black man in handcuffs, ribs broken, shirt soaked in blood. No ID, no family. Nurse Reyes, prioritize patient 1. He's a state advisor, the white shift captain said, voice brisk. Clara glanced at the official arm injury, non-life-threatening. Then at the young man chest sinking dangerously, suspected pneumothorax. She didn't argue. She simply moved. When they saw her inserting a chest tube into the handcuffed man, the captain barked, "You're violating protocol." She replied quietly, "I'm saving the one who might not make it without me." 2 days later, she was suspended indefinitely. That night, she called her husband. He was stationed in a volatile district. He only said, "You did right. I'm proud." 3 days later, he died in an explosion while aiding injured civilians, the last medic who stayed. Clara never returned to the hospital, never returned to systems, protocols, or authority. Instead, she opened Morning Porch. She no longer healed wounds. She served tea. She baked bread. But in every glance, every gentle touch, lived a nurse's belief. A cup of tea can still be medicine. But even kindness has no armor against a changing world. 2 blocks away, a tech cafe opened. LED lights, app-based orders, blasting music. They didn't sell handmade pastries. They sold digital experiences. Customers left Clara's one by one. Those who once came to feel seen were now drawn to convenience. More leftover loaves, fewer footsteps. Still, Clara opened early. Still left warm bread on the sill. Still brewed tea for a bench that might never be filled again. 1 week later, Miguel, the wiry delivery driver, arrived late. He handed Clara a damp, creased notice. "They're passing ordinances. No more loitering," he muttered. "Administrative order. Maintain neighborhood aesthetics. Remove unauthorized encampments. No loitering permitted in public spaces." Signed, Commissioner Richard Whitlow, man who once called Clara's cappuccino forgettable. Clara folded the paper, placed it in a drawer, said nothing. That night, she brewed a larger pot of ginger tea, baked 2 loaves. The next morning, the bench was still empty. And for the first time, Clara felt fear. Not fear of losing customers, not fear of closing doors, but fear that, once again, she might be too late. And in the quiet kitchen, Rue lay curled on a mat, eyes half closed. Clara reached down, brushed his head. He whimpered, as if dreaming things he couldn't explain. From the front, she heard the stir of a spoon in chamomile, the soft tap of chess pieces, the door's gentle chimothy, return of people who came for peace, not playlists. And Clara knew the cracks in the city and in herself were still there. But where there are cracks, light can find a way in. Tuesday morning arrived with a sudden cold, as if someone had shut the last warm door of March. Clara was arranging new tea boxes when a sharp sound tapped the cafe window. Rue, but not his usual slow, graceful gait. He ran frantic, urgent. His front paw scratched the glass. His eyes wild with fear. Clara rushed outside and saw her. The woman on the bench was slumped to one side. body curled like a leaf surrendering to rain. "No," Clara whispered. She ran across the street. Rue stayed close, step for step, as if he'd been waiting for Clara to notice. Her hands trembled as she reached the woman's wrist pulse, still there, but weak. Skin cold, lips tinged gray-blue. A fading bruise along the left cheek deepened to purple-black. Without hesitation, Clara lifted her left arm behind frail shoulders, right arm under thin knees. Rue walked beside them, eyes never leaving the woman. For the first time, she entered morning porch not on her own feet, but in Clara's arms. Clara laid her on the long bench in the corner, pulled a wool blanket from the back room, tucked it gently. Rue curled up beside her, head on her lap. Andre and Mrs. Matthews watched, silent. Miguel locked the door, flipped the sign, "Take out only." Clara lit a candle, brewed peppermint tea. When the woman stirred, her eyes fluttered, scanning, not frightened, more like someone locating a memory. "You're safe now. This is Morning Porch. I'm Clara." She didn't speak. Her gaze drifted toward the faint music Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9. Then, in soft French, "C'est Chopin, 12 mesures avant la pluie." Clara froze. She remembered enough college French to recognize the phrase, but the accent, that wasn't the accent of someone unhoused. "You speak French?" A faint nod. Then she pointed to the teapot. Clara poured a cup. She sipped, eyes closing gently. After a while, she gestured for a pen. Clara offered an old fountain pen. She wrote, with steady, elegant strokes, "I used to run this city." Clara stopped breathing, the handwriting poised, practiced, the kind that had once signed thousands of policy documents. "What's your name?" Clara whispered. The woman smiled, said nothing. But when Clara removed her tattered coat to cover her better, a paper slipped to the floor. Clara picked it up. An old newspaper clipping, yellowed and creased. A photo of a younger woman, brown hair, waving to a crowd outside Atlanta's City Hall. Caption, "Atlanta's youngest mayor, 1,993. Clara looked at the photo, then at the woman resting now, thinner, older, but unmistakable. A chill traced Clara's spine, not from fear, but from the realization of what everyone else had failed to see. That in the shadow of a bench and a forgotten cup of tea sat a woman who had once carried an entire city. Clara didn't ask more. She just sat nearby, kept the tea warm, and let the woman rest. Rue curled at her feet, one eye open, like a silent sentry in a room no longer at war, but still full of wounds. As the morning passed, Clara went to the counter, opened a drawer, and took out a faded memorial card, her husband's funeral, after the chaos in the city. The bottom held a blurred mayor's signature. The handwriting looked familiar. That afternoon, the woman awoke, sat up, leaned back, looked through the window at the golden light brushing the street. "My name is Margo," she said. Her voice was rough, but sure. Clara nodded. "Welcome to Morning Porch, Margo." And just like that, the woman on the bench was invisible no more. Clara didn't sleep that night. Morning Porch was silent, lit only by the kitchen's faint glow. Margo slept on the bench, Rue curled beside her like a folded blanket of breath and fur. Clara sat at the counter, eyes locked on the flattened newspaper. The photo showed a young woman, arm raised mid-wave, a spark of fearless hope in her eyes. Now, she lay silent in the corner, her voice long buried beneath the city's noise. Clara took the paper and descended to the basement, where an old printer Miguel once fixed sat idle. The next morning, she brought the copy to a technician who specialized in restoring damaged text. He squinted, frowned. "Where did you find this?" "It fell from someone's coat." He examined it longer. "This isn't fake, it's real print, but someone erased the name using chemical solvents. This kind of redaction's not amateur work." Clara said thank you, took the restored copy, and returned home. Mrs. Matthews sat reading by the window. Clara handed her the paper. "Do you recognize this woman?" The old widow didn't hesitate. "Margo Whitmore. She fought to save Pine Hollow in the 90s. Back then, she was the city's rising star. Clara felt a chill. And then she disappeared, just vanished. Rumors flew, political silencing, land scandal, threats. But then the news stopped. Records vanished. Clara clutched the paper to her chest. It wasn't fear she felt. It was momentum. That night, she dug into the city's public archives. Margo Whitmore, no results. Policy records from 1,992. 1,994 corrupted files. But when she searched housing petitions, one document surfaced. Petition to block commercial rezoning of District 17, submitted by M. Whitmore. She opened it. Hundreds of signatures. Black families, immigrant workers, blue-collar names, all from Pine Hollow, before it was razed to build luxury condos and chain cafes, including the 1-2 blocks from Morning Porch. Clara printed all 32 pages, stapled them neatly, folded them into a folder. Memory, evidence, a buried truth. The next morning, Margo woke early. Rue sat beside her. Clara handed her the folder. "Did you write this petition?" Margot's fingers trembled. She turned each page. Tears welled but never fell. "I tried," she said, "but they chose to forget." Clara poured tea, sat across from her. "Well, not anymore." Margo studied Clara's face, then whispered, "It's not for me. It's for this place. For those who were never seen, never named, never given a seat at the city's table." Clara nodded. Deep inside, something long undefined began to find its name. And she said quietly, "Then it's time," they heard us. Thursday evening. The lights glowed harshly inside District 3's community hall. Wooden chairs were arranged in perfect lines. Fluorescents hummed above the heads of businessmen, city clerks, tired residents, and a few souls who rarely spoke up. Clara sat in the third row, the folder of Margot's documents clutched tight in her lap like holding in a breath too long. At the front stood Councilman Richard Whitlow, gray suit, red tie, voice like honey poured over cold steel, the kind of man who had said too much and listened too little. "Tonight, we discuss beautification measures for the downtown corridor. That includes removing illegal squatters from public benches, improving storefront uniformity, and developing our commercial zones." Clara flinched. Every word cut like a blade across the faces she knew. The bench where Margo once sat, the quiet corner with Mrs. Matthews, Andre's chessboard table. When Whitlow asked for comments, Clara rose. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Heads turned. A few recognized her, the cafe owner with the calm eyes. "My name is Clara Reyes. I own Morning Porch. I don't speak for businesses tonight. I speak for the people who have nowhere left to be. The ones who live off the grid not by choice, but because the grid erased them. A bench and a warm cup should never be seen as a threat." A murmur rippled, but Clara went on. "I was once a nurse. I know what it looks like when life is dismissed just because it doesn't fit inside a box. That's what I see here tonight." Whitlow offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thank you, Ms. Reyes. But, for context, your cafe serves mostly immigrants, and those who, let's say, don't represent the city's finest image." The room shifted. Then the back doors opened. A figure stepped in. Thin, steady. Margo Whitmore. Old coat, walking stick, Rue beside her. The light caught the silver in her hair like frost. She didn't need introduction. Clara didn't turn. She knew. Margo walked forward. No one breathed. She reached the podium. Her voice, gravel and truth. "I would like to speak." Whitlow blinked. "And you are?" "Margo Whitmore, Mayor of Atlanta, 1993. Civilian Advisor to the U.S. Marine Corps, Eritrea, 1988–91. Gasps. Phones raised. Rue sat down beside her, a sentinel. "I protected Native communities from illegal extraction deals. I exposed military contracts that traded lives for profits. For that, I was erased from records, from news, from memory. In 1994, I uncovered corruption in this very council. Months later, my name vanished. She held up the petition. This is from 1993. Hundreds of names. Residents of Pine Hollow who were evicted to make space for what now fills your donor sheets. No interruption. I'm not here to reclaim my title. I'm here to remind you, if community only belongs to the wealthy, it ceases to be a community. It becomes a facade of power. A pause. Cameras blinked. If Morning Porch isn't the community, then you've forgotten what community means. She stepped back. Rue followed. One by one, the room rose. Not clapping, not cheering, just standing. To see, to witness. That night, a 2-minute, 47-second video titled "Homeless Elder Silences City Council" went viral. By morning, 1.2 million views. The next morning, sunlight spilled differently through Morning Porch's window panes. Clara had opened early, but she wasn't alone. A young woman stood outside, phone clutched in her hand, eyes rimmed red. I just wanted to see her, to know she's real. How could someone like her disappear and no one notice? Clara didn't answer. She brewed a cup of herbal tea, slid it across the counter, and stepped away. People came, then more, not to sip lattes or scroll in peace, but to witness, to remember. Within 48 hours, Margo's City Hall video had gone global. #Bench Lady of District 3. The Atlanta Standard ran a story. The woman history tried to erase. Their investigation dug deep. Pine Hollow. The forced evictions. Margo's sudden resignation. A buried memo warning of laundering via real estate contracts. Her whistleblowing on defense procurement ethics. People who remembered her sent letters. Signatures, clippings, handwritten notes. One man, Luther, once her aide, wrote, "I didn't have the courage to stand by her then, but I'm alive now to say she was always right." An organization called Civic Hearth reached out. A nonprofit rebuilding neighborhoods fractured by gentrification. They brought no press kits, only a blank notebook. "We don't want to rewrite history," they said. "We want to hear it from those left out." Margo took her time, then penned a single line. Healing doesn't begin in blueprints. It begins when someone sets down a cup of tea the right way. Meanwhile, trouble brewed for the coffee chain 2 blocks down the one that once threatened Morning Porch's survival. A black former employee posted about being fired for not fitting the brand aesthetic. The post went viral. Dozens of similar complaints followed. An independent review revealed banned EU flavoring and undocumented seasonal hires. Ratings plummeted. An editorial put it plainly: when a brand forgets its humanity, the market reminds it. Back at Morning Porch, something else was happening. People weren't just customers. They were community again. An architecture student blogged, "This place feels like the city's living room." Margo stayed by her window seat. Rue watched the door. Kids came by to pet him, calling him the old soldier at the gate. Andre brought friends to play chess. Mrs. Matthews hosted poetry mornings. Miguel offered free tea and bread on Sundays to unhoused guests. A group of local teens built a board outside. Community memory wall. Photos. Notes. A grocery receipt from 1996 signed by Margo. The city council invite Clara had kept since the cafe's first year. One rainy afternoon, Clara stood before the wall. Tears on her cheeks, not of sadness, but of belief. Belief that kindness, once buried, had found its breath again. Then came a postcard from Eritrea. Just a few lines. "The woman who once protected us still lives. Gratitude from those who never forgot." That same morning, as Clara reached for the kettle, she caught sight of a small girl outside, curly hair, eyes full of quiet wonder, pausing near the old bench. Their eyes met through the glass. Rue lifted his head. Clara smiled. A new generation had arrived. Not with speeches, but with trust. And it was enough. Weekend morning. A yellowing envelope slipped into the wrong mailbox years ago, now found its way back to morning porch. Clara opened it with flour-dusted fingers, her breath catching as she read the sender. Sergeant Marco Reyes. The handwriting was rushed, familiar, and tender, the last letter he wrote before he died. My dearest Clara, if you still believe in kindness, don't just heal people. Build a place where kindness can live, where it can breathe. If I don't make it back, let our love be the foundation. Clara sat down, the letter pressed against her heart. No sound, no wailing, but the grief went deep. Margo approached, saying nothing, only placing a hand on Clara's shoulder. Rue stayed by their feet still, steady, guarding memory. Clara framed the letter, placed it behind the counter. People noticed, but no one asked. Spring came. The cafe didn't just grow busy. It became a place people belonged to. One morning, a girl about 11, curly-haired, dirt-smudged, stood by the door. Clara opened it. You want tea? The girl shook her head. I want to learn. I saw you stir the tea, like it was magic. Clara smiled, truly smiled. Come in. I'll teach you. But tea takes time. Kindness does too. She handed the girl a tiny apron and taught her to brew chamomile-th first tea Marco ever made her. Mrs. Matthews left a new poem at the corner table. When a seed falls from the hands of the grieving, perhaps a garden grows where memory once faded. Miguel added his mother's waffle recipe to a small notebook left out for guests. Andre brought a new chess set, played with adults now, laughed even when he lost. Margo began speaking more, sharing pieces of policy she once tried to write. Students recorded it. It became a living archive. The porch papers. One Saturday, teens hung a new sign outside. Community Station, a place for hope. Clara placed Marco's wooden plaque beneath it. It begins with a cup of tea. And for the first time in years, Clara didn't rush to serve. She sat, watched. A community was caring for itself. When the doorbell chimed, the apprentice ran to greet the guest. Chamomile brewed. Rue dozed beneath the counter. And Clara thought, some mornings never make it to the receipt, but they live forever in the heart.